6 days. 6 days of preseason testing in Bahrain. 2 weeks, 11 teams, 22 drivers. And I'm going to say something right now before we get into any of it.
Say it.
The 2026 F1 season might already be over. And I don't mean that as a hot take, I mean it as a conclusion drawn from everything we just watched. Ferrari. But it's bigger than Ferrari. What happened in Bahrain over these 2 weeks was genuinely one of the most chaotic, fascinating, revealing preseasons I've ever watched. We had a rear wing that flips upside down. We had an engine scandal. We had a team with Adrian Newey as its technical director, complete 6 laps on the final day and go home early. 6 laps. 6 laps. So let's get into it. Let's go week by week, story by story, and then at the end, we'll talk about what the pecking order actually looks like heading into Melbourne on March 8th.
Let's do it.
Before we get into the stories, we need to frame what 2026 actually is, because this is not a normal regulation change. This is the biggest overhaul in Formula One history. Give people the headline version. New aerodynamics, active aero, meaning the wings physically move depending on whether you're on a straight or in a corner, new power units, near 50-50 split between combustion engine and electrical power, new fuel, sustainable fuel, new chassis proportions. Everything changed at the same time. And that matters because when everything changes at once, the gaps between teams become enormous. In 2014, when the last major regulation reset happened, Mercedes were 2 seconds per lap faster than everyone in the first race. 2 seconds! And they dominated for 7 years. This feels similar, except this time there's more than one team who might have cracked it. So the stakes of preseason were genuinely high this year, higher than they've been in a decade. Every lap in Bahrain told you something real, and what it told us was uncomfortable for some people.
Let's start with Ferrari, because honestly, everything this preseason revolved around what Ferrari did or didn't do. Week 1, solid. Good mileage. Hamilton beds in. Leclerc gets comfortable. Nothing dramatic. Week 2 is where it got insane.
Walk us through it day by day.
Day 1 of the second test, Wednesday, Ferrari roll out a brand new power unit, not the one they used for 4,300 kilometers across Barcelona and both Bahrain tests, a fresh one. New aero package, new gearbox, complete reset. Why does that matter? Teams swap parts all the time. Because the original engine covered the equivalent of 14 Grand Prix distances without a reliability failure. That's extraordinary. And Ferrari's reaction was, cool. Let's not risk it, swap it out, start fresh. That is the confidence of a team that knows exactly where they are. That's not testing, that's a statement. And then day 2, Thursday, Hamilton goes out in the morning. 5 laps in, the whole paddock stops. Sky Sports technical analyst Sam Collins is watching the onboard feed and he goes, I thought at first that was a technical failure. It wasn't. The wing. Ferrari had been running a rear wing where when Hamilton hits the straight and activates the active aero system, the flap doesn't just open flat to reduce drag like every other car, it rotates a full 180 degrees, completely inverted. It ends up upside down, running like an airplane wing, generating lift instead of downforce.
Why would you want lift on an F1 car? Isn't that the opposite of everything?
On a straight, yes, it's the opposite of everything. And that's the genius of it. You don't need downforce on a straight. What you need is zero drag. And a wing running inverted creates lift, which effectively acts against the car's weight, reducing rolling resistance, dumping drag, maximizing top speed. It also counters an exhaust wing they'd introduced the day before, which adds downforce but costs drag on straights. The two innovations work together as a system.
And is this legal?
That's the question everyone asked. The regulations on active aero specify how fast the wing can move and how far, but they don't say which orientation it needs to be in when deployed. Ferrari found that silence in the rules and drove a truck through it.
What was the reaction in the paddock?
Williams team principal James Vowles said publicly, Ferrari are coming up with great innovations and I think they're competitive. In F1, that's code for we're terrified. Sky Sports' Bernie Collins said Ferrari tried it very briefly right at the very start of the day and hoped nobody else noticed. They noticed. And by the afternoon, every team's engineers had their phones out looking at footage.
And then Ferrari said it's just a test item. They might not even use it.
Which is either true or it's the most brilliant piece of psychological warfare in F1 history. Because now every other team's aero department has to spend the next 3 weeks figuring out whether to try to copy it, whether it's legal, and whether Ferrari is bluffing about it being a test item. That's unpaid labor Ferrari forced onto their rivals. And the performance results across the whole week. Day 3, Leclerc goes fastest in the morning on a full fuel load on medium tires, not even pushing. 8/10 faster than anyone from the previous day. 8/10. And the race simulation data from Hamilton's running suggested strong pace management too. Ferrari ended the entire preseason on top of the timing sheets.
So what's your honest read on Ferrari?
My honest read is this. Ferrari in 2025 had a car that was fast over 1 lap but fell apart over race distance. They knew it. They restructured the whole technical operation in the offseason. They built the 2026 car with a philosophy specifically designed around the new energy management rules. A smaller turbo to win starts, an exhaust wing to maximize downforce, an inverted rear wing to kill drag on straights. None of this is accidental. This is a coherent car philosophy, and I think it's the right one.
Ferrari haven't won a championship since 2008.
I know, but I'm looking at this preseason and I see a team that came to Bahrain with a plan, executed it across 6 days, didn't make mistakes, and left with more advantage than they arrived with. That's what championship teams do.
Okay, we have to talk about the engine situation because I think this has flown slightly under the radar for casual fans, but it is genuinely massive.
It is, and it's complicated, so let me try to break it down clearly. The 2026 regulations set a maximum compression ratio for engines at 16:1, down from 18:1 under the old rules. The purpose was to make engines slightly less extreme, slightly cheaper to develop. Simple enough.
Right?
The wrinkle is in how that ratio is measured. The regulation says it's measured at ambient temperature, meaning the engine is cold, not running. And the allegation from rival manufacturers, understood to be led by Audi but backed by Ferrari, Honda, and potentially Red Bull, is that Mercedes found a way to comply with 16:1 when the engine is cold, but then as the engine heats up to racing temperature, the compression ratio increases towards 18:1 due to thermal expansion in the combustion chamber.
So they pass the test in the garage, but run a hotter, more powerful engine on track.
Potentially. And if true, estimates from engineers suggest that's worth somewhere between 10 and 15 extra horsepower, which in modern F1, where races are won by tenths of a second, is enormous.
What does Mercedes say?
Toto Wolff was characteristically blunt. He told rivals to get their shit together. He said Mercedes had kept the FIA fully informed throughout their engine development and had received assurances that what they were doing was within the rules. He also pointed out that the regulation has been written the same way through 14 different iterations since 2022, and nobody flagged it until now.
Which is a fair point.
It's a genuinely fair point, and this is where I have my own opinion, which I'll give you in a second. But first, what did the FIA do? They triggered an e-vote. They sent an electronic ballot to the 5 engine manufacturers asking them to approve a new testing procedure that would measure compression ratios both at ambient temperature and at 130 degrees Celsius operating temperature. And crucially, if approved, this doesn't come into effect until August 1st, 2026, race 13.
So Mercedes keeps whatever advantage they may or may not have for the first 12 races.
Correct. And Fred Vasseur, Ferrari's team principal, called this a shame. Ferrari wanted the rule changed before Australia. The FIA's position, explained by Nicholas Tombazassi, was essentially, we don't think this crosses the line into illegal. We think it's a gray area that exploits the spirit but not the letter of the rules. And we don't think it's fair to teams who've already built their engines to suddenly change the test procedure before race 1.
What's your take on this?
Honest take? I think Mercedes found a real loophole. I think Toto's right that it's technically legal under the current wording. I also think it was clearly not the intention of the rules. The FIA lowered the compression ratio limit specifically to reduce power, and if teams can run effectively at the old limit by exploiting the ambient temperature measurement, the rule change achieved nothing for those teams.
But isn't that F1? Teams find loopholes. That's part of the game.
Absolutely it is, and I'm not saying Mercedes cheated. But here's what concerns me. The vote requires a supermajority of 4 manufacturers plus the FIA and FOM. Mercedes has customer teams in McLaren, Williams, and Alpine, 3 of the top 6 teams. If those 3 teams benefit from the Mercedes engine advantage, none of them have any incentive to vote yes on a rule change that might slow them down. And Mercedes alone can't block it, but the dynamic is interesting.
So this vote might not even pass.
It might not. And if it doesn't, we could be watching Mercedes run a contested engine advantage for the entire season. That's not a rumor anymore. That's a real possibility.
Next, we need to talk about Aston Martin. And I want to be careful here because this is genuinely sad. Not in a dramatic way, in a watching someone's dreams fall apart way.
Give people the context first. Who is this team? What did they promise? And what happened?
Okay, Aston Martin, Lawrence Stroll's project. The team that spent the last 3 years building a facility, hiring talent, and then the crown jewel, signing Adrian Newey. Adrian Newey, the greatest car designer in the history of Formula One, the man who designed championship cars for Williams, McLaren, and Red Bull. They pulled him out of retirement. This was supposed to be the year everything came together.
And then?
They couldn't get the car to the Barcelona shakedown on time. They were 4 months late getting a model into the wind tunnel because of delays. The car only came together at the last minute. When they finally ran in Bahrain in week 1, Lance Stroll said they were 4 seconds off the pace. 4 seconds.
And the GPS data from week 1 actually quantified where that deficit came from. According to BBC Sport Analysis, 1.5 seconds of that 4-second gap, roughly 37.5%, came from the Honda engine alone, the rest from the chassis.
So both the engine and the car are slow.
Both. And in week 2, it got worse. Day 1, Stroll spins into the gravel on lap 7. Day 2, Alonso suffers a battery failure mid-race simulation, brings out a red flag. Day 3, the car doesn't even make it out of the garage in the first hour. Then it finally goes out, completes 6 laps, and the team packs up and goes home with 2 hours of running still available.
6 laps on the final day of preseason testing.
6 laps. And the comparison that keeps coming up, the comparison that Jolyon Palmer made on Sky Sports F1 is McLaren-Honda 2017, the last season of that failed partnership. That Honda averaged 247.5 kilometers per day. Aston Martin in this test averaged just over 240 kilometers per day, almost identical numbers.
And McLaren ended that partnership at the end of 2017 because it was destroying them, and went on to win a championship with Mercedes power in 2024. Look, I don't think we should completely write off Aston Martin. Newey designs take time to come together. The technical philosophy he uses is very different from what any team on the grid does, and Alonso himself said he believes they can unlock seconds once they get sustained running.
But here's the problem. The next time this car runs is Melbourne, in front of 150,000 people at Albert Park, with cameras everywhere. If the Honda engine keeps failing, those failures happen in qualifying in the race on global television.
That's the nightmare scenario. And what makes it worse is something specific about how the Honda situation developed. Honda had an 18-month downtime from F1 between 2021 and 2023 after their initial withdrawal. Their engine department was effectively on standby. They missed a critical window of 2026 development that every other manufacturer used. Ferrari, Mercedes, Audi, they all had models in the wind tunnel from January 2024 when the aero testing ban ended. Honda didn't get a model in until April, 4 months behind. In engine development, 4 months is a lifetime.
And now there's no time to fix it.
The engines get homologated on March 1st, locked in for the season. What Honda has in Bahrain is essentially what they'll have in Melbourne. The improvement path from here has to come from software, from energy deployment strategy, from the chassis side, not from fundamental engine changes. I feel for Fernando Alonso in this situation. I do too. He's 44 years old. This is almost certainly his last serious shot at competing for a championship. He came back specifically because Newey was coming, because this was supposed to be the team that finally gave him a 3rd title. And right now, his car might be the slowest on the grid in Australia. Okay, let's run through the rest of the teams quickly before we get to our final verdict. Mercedes. Strong. George Russell topped Week 2, Day 1. Kimi Antonelli, the 19-year-old rookie, topped Day 2 with the fastest lap of the entire preseason at 132.803. Mercedes also debuted a 4-element rear wing on the final day, another aero innovation nobody else has tried. They're in this fight. The engine controversy might help them. Their race pace looked very strong in the long-run data.
McLaren?
Complicated. Lando Norris, the reigning world champion, was publicly cautious. He admitted McLaren haven't carried over their 2025 strengths. Oscar Piastri had a brief stoppage at the end of Day 2 during the race start practice. Their race simulation pace was competitive against Verstappen in the long-run data, but Ferrari's pace in that data was obscured by Hamilton's early morning loss to the wing experiment. McLaren is good, but I don't think they're as dominant as 2025.
Red Bull?
Fascinating. Verstappen completed 137 laps in one day, which tells you the car is reliable, but he was openly critical of the new regulations all week, said they don't feel like Formula One, compared them to Formula E. Red Bull themselves admitted they think they're fourth fastest. The concern is whether Verstappen's public frustration turns into something deeper. He has a contract opt-out clause. If the car isn't competitive by mid-season, that conversation gets louder.
Williams, Haas, the smaller teams?
Williams completed the joint most laps in Week 1 with McLaren, 422 each, impressive reliability, but their performance runs on softer tires were underwhelming. Haas looked quietly decent. Esteban Ocon was P4 on the final morning, and they also had the most laps on Day 3. The Haas-Toyota partnership for 2026 seems to be a genuine step forward. Alpine had stoppages, but managing director Steve Nielsen said they'd made a genuinely better car than last year. Cadillac, the new team, completed their laps, wasn't embarrassingly slow, and might genuinely be ahead of Aston Martin at the season opener.
Cadillac could be ahead of Aston Martin.
That's what the data suggests right now, which is either a testament to how well Cadillac have done for a new team or an indictment of how badly Aston Martin's preseason has gone. Probably both.
Okay, Melbourne, March 8th. What does the starting grid look like in terms of genuine pace? Forget the timing sheets. What do we actually believe? Based purely on what we saw in Bahrain across both tests, and with the caveat that preseason is always partially deceptive, this is where I'd put them. Ferrari first, and it's not close. The new engine, the aero philosophy, the consistent lap times on full fuel loads, the innovation appetite, they're in a different place to where they were 12 months ago. They've clearly identified what went wrong in 2025 and corrected it. I think Ferrari start Melbourne as the car to beat.
Mercedes second?
Mercedes second. The engine question mark actually helps them right now because it stays legal until August. Their car looks quick. Both drivers, Russell and Antonelli, had strong weeks. Antonelli, in particular, has silenced the doubters. People were worried about putting a 19-year-old in that car at the start of a brand new regulation era. He topped the fastest lap of all preseason testing. That's not nothing.
McLaren third?
McLaren third. But I want to caveat, McLaren's strength in 2025 was race management, tire degradation, strategic intelligence. Some of that carries over regardless of regulation changes. I think they're closer to Mercedes than the timing sheets suggest. Red Bull, fourth, which is genuinely shocking to say. A team with Max Verstappen, who I still think is the best driver on the grid, sitting fourth. But Red Bull themselves said it. And when a team admits they're fourth, you listen. Their car has reliability, it has mileage, but the raw pace isn't there yet.
And then Aston Martin.
Then a big gap, and then Aston Martin somewhere in the bottom half, which is genuinely heartbreaking given the names and the investment involved. But 6 laps on the final day of preseason testing is not a recoverable position. Not in 2 weeks, not before Australia.
Last thing, the most important story coming out of Bahrain that nobody is talking about enough.
The rear wing arms race. In the space of 3 days, we went from standard active aero to Ferrari's inverted wing to Mercedes' 4-element wing. The regulations opened a door and teams are sprinting through it. By the time we get to the European summer, Silverstone, Monza, Spa, these cars are going to look genuinely alien. The aero development race in 2026 is going to be unlike anything we've seen since the turbo era of the 1980s.
And the FAA has no rules to stop it. The FAA is essentially writing the rules in real time, and the teams are moving faster than the regulations can catch them, which is terrifying and incredible, and exactly why I cannot wait for Melbourne.
Thank you for listening to Apex Intel. Leave a like and comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more news. We'll see you next week.